Hello and welcome to the 6 Plus show, a podcast for your wargaming and 40k needs. Hobby talk, tactics, tournament reports, lore and much more. We have it all. Please welcome your host for the evening, Tom.
Welcome, ladies, gentlemen, and gribbly tollkeepers, to that 6 Plus show. I am your host, Tom, and today we are kicking things off with a very special first edition of a new segment we're going to be running called State of Play, where we examine specific factions in depth for an hour, get into what makes them tick, get into how they've been doing, get into where they're headed in the future. And most importantly, we talk to some people we love very much who are very damn good at playing said armies. So with that in mind, I am joined tonight by the current number one seeded Death Guard player in the world, Stuart McIntyre. Say hello, Stuart.
Hello.
We're not worthy.
Yeah.
It's a pleasure to have you on. And I'm also regrettably joined by Lee, a man of no worthy note.
It's hard to argue with any of that, and I've just said it's great to have someone on here who finally knows what they're talking about.
It's been long overdue, right? Got to get that talent in from somewhere.
Got to get some credibility somewhere, because we can't just keep coasting.
So today we're going to be talking all things Death Guard. This is an army that thankfully all of us played to some extent. They were my first army back in the game. Lee picked them up.
Mine was a lockdown project, really.
Ninth, yeah.
They had a shiny new book, and I was like, oh, my armies are kind of all rubbish. Let's pick a good one. And then, I mean, the story will tell how that went for the next year or two. But
actually, Stuart's Death Guard origin story we don't know, so that's what we're going to start with today. I'm genuinely curious. I actually don't know. When I first met Stuart, he was a fully formed little Death Guard player out of his chrysalis, ready to go. So, Stuart, take us through it. How and when did Death Guard happen for you? What's your background?
So amazingly, it falls into the same plague-ridden story of a lot of people, I guess. We got stuck at home with not a lot to do. Yeah. I've always been a Chaos Space Marine player since I came back into the hobby to play 40k. Mm-hmm. I've always been a Chaos collector, even longer than that. I played Fantasy 2nd Edition, went to GTs, worked for Games Workshop for a short period of time, and used to sit in the Games Workshop in St Albans and write disgusting lists and try and spin sixes and do all the things that you do until you go to university and decide you don't want to paint toy soldiers very much anymore. So when Chaos Space Marines kind of started to fall by the wayside, I decided I wanted to have a bit of every legion. And I'd been working my way through, and I picked up some Thousand Sons and painted some of them. And Death Guard actually were just the next thing on the list. I just wanted to paint some. And I found someone selling some secondhand and started doing some conversions because I love my kit bashing. Yeah. And then started playing them and then went, oh, this is my kind of calling. They play the way I like to play, you know. Yeah. I tried the Thousand Sons. There was too much admin. And the Chaos Space Marine still felt too much like 7th edition, where you needed great big balls of death with a million overlapping auras, and if it didn't work, you died. Yeah. I felt that they were a way of me improving myself, basically.
Can I just add at this point, Stuart's armies, I hate going to events where Stuart goes to them, actually, because he always wins all the best painted and best army awards every event. Not that I'm really in the running for them anyway, but just, I mean, if you get the chance, I don't know, Stuart, if you've got like an Instagram page or anything like that, but you should have one, and you should plug it now, because your armies are beautiful.
Absolutely.
And the 3 people that are going to watch this should go there and see that.
Definitely. And if we could borrow a photo of your lads to get up on the Insta when we put this out, that'd be lovely. So we can show off. It's your possessed that haunt me. Their little grins.
Yeah, they haunt me in the game, actually. Some horrible stories about them.
There's wonderful conversions in there. That's interesting. There was another lockdown project.
For some reason, I had it in my head that you'd been playing Death Guard for years and years and years.
No, I've always been Chaos Space Marines.
Death
Guard's the edition.
So it's a lot like yourself, Lee, where that sort of chaos is very much the bedrock of what you're about. But obviously, Death Guard have had such nice new stuff in the last few years in terms of models and range that they are a really nice one to dive into, aren't they, as a project?
So probably only properly started recording competitive Death Guard games in May, June of last year.
Nice.
And keeping a track of how I was doing. And that coincides with the club I go to reopening
Yes.
as well. So
Twisted Dice.
Indeed.
Another shout out for them. They are getting some good publicity from our 3 viewers.
Absolutely.
The problem is actually, Stuart, you're one of our 3 viewers.
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't know if Stuart's on here. I don't know who's going to say
who else is going to watch.
One of our all-time favourite viewers.
Right?
Yeah. But we'll wait and see. I think with the way Death Guard currently are this week, not to give too much away, I think we'll get some interest just from people who are excited to chat Death Guard
hope so.
right now. But we will see. So let's launch into it, because I think it's actually very interesting to hear you say that you feel they're a natural fit for you stylistically, because I think that begs the question of, I'm very curious how you see Death Guard stylistically, how you see them when you're playing them and when you're using them. What's the sort of the vision for how a Death Guard army works? How do you think they've been kitted out in 9th edition to play the game? And what is it about that perhaps that suits you, do you think?
So I think that it's fair to say it's one of the better balanced codexes.
Yes.
From front to back. There's some units that over the 2 years of 9th have seen far more play than others, but at the same time, there's also been nothing that's been nerfed to the ground or spammed to Kingdom Come, So it lends itself well to being run in quite a few different ways. And even now, there's still countless debates on Death Guard Facebook groups and forums and whatnot about, well, I'm going to try this and I'm going to try that. And so the formula is still not really solved.
Yeah.
So that's part of it, that the book's balanced. So if you're a collector of an army, it's actually one of those ones where it's quite nice to collect all of it, because all of it's relevant.
Yeah. Yeah.
You can find a place for any of it. The other thing about play style that it lends itself well to is that it plays in every phase.
Mm-hmm. I'm a big believer in armies that play in every phase.
Yeah. And actually, it's probably its most crucial phase, ironically, for what's thought of as being a slow army, is the command and movement phase.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because if you get those wrong, then you get double punished because you're slow.
Yes.
But at the same time, you're rewarded by getting a lot of those things right, basically. So that's kind of the appeal, if you like. And then, did you asked about what the nuts and bolts are? Or
yeah, I think if you're going to try and sort of describe what their key strengths and their key mechanics are, what are the things that every game, every list tends to hinge on for you with Death Guard?
So it's got wonderfully diverse mortal wound output.
Yeah, it really does.
It loves weird things like Gazgol and Catans and things like that, because I don't think there's another army that can do mortal wounds in as many different phases. Not a crazy volume, but it can just keep putting a smattering of pressure all the time, whether it be Typhus in the command phase, stratagems in the command phase. I can do mortal wounds in the movement phase through a relic. I can do mortal wounds in, shooting through all kinds of things, and obviously in combat. And then if you kill me, I blow up and do mortal wounds to you that way. It's. I've even got things that do mortal wounds in your movement phase if you're standing too close to me. There's lots of just constantly pestering your opponent and making them do the thing they don't want to do first. It's like, and most of the time those things don't even come off. Oh, do you know if you're standing 6 inches away from me, I'm going to do D3 mortal wounds to you? Oh, I'll move further away. Brilliant. Now you're further away.
Yeah.
That's great.
The deterrent army.
Yeah, all the time. Oh, I've got a strat to heroically intervene. Oh, I'll just move a bit further back. Brilliant. You're further back. It's not that you're trying to catch people out. It's just that you've got all these mechanics that make someone have to revert away from what their normal plan would be. And I think that's the same for everything that the army does, whether that's having one thing left alive at the end when the person was totally expecting to clean your unit out, or just not quite killing enough in combat and then getting hit back and getting a bit of chip damage that they weren't really expecting. Not through spiky dice, just because a little bit of extra toughness and a slightly better save or feel no pain or whatever it is, just you've got to play Death Guard against Death Guard enough, I feel, to truly understand what it takes to completely wipe a unit. And once you've got it, it's doable. It's not a difficult thing. I've played a couple of games recently against the new Craft World book, and if it wants to kill something, it's dead.
Yeah.
But if you're greedy and you try and split fire, and you leave two things with five models in each, then you might as well have not shot either of them. So it's those kind of things. So that's a big part of it for me. Understanding the capabilities of how the army can survive, and where it needs to do that on the board. It does some really nice things about moving outside of the movement phase, whether it's resurrecting poxwalkers, whether it's in like the term and assess function about being able to deep strike things that wouldn't normally be allowed to, or bringing things back from reserve. It's not like a Craft World army in that regard, where it's got move, shoot, move functionality, or leaving combat after you've been in combat. But it's the timing that's crucial. So you've both played against me and seen me do it, whether it be a heroic intervention with a Poxwalker unit like we did in our game, Lee, that you mentioned on the podcast.
It was
gave me
so clever.
3 inches of movement and a 3-inch pile in, and then a 3-inch consolidate at the end as you surf around the unit.
Yeah, so powerful. I never really recovered from that, and it's just
and that unit that would normally have only been allowed to go 4 inches plus an advance is past the midboard in my turn one. But with little things like that, or we had the same thing in a Gene Stealer Cult game, Tom, where you shoot 7 Poxwalkers and it feels like you're doing something, and then 6 come back, and now I'm on the objective and I score 12 on the primary because the strat for bringing back the Poxwalkers happens at the beginning of the command phase, and you score the primary at the end of the command phase. So it's those are really crucial elements of being a Death Guard player, is knowing when to use some of those tricks, and when you need to sacrifice a unit, and when you really need a unit to survive because you need that swing. The psychic support's good in the army, I feel.
That's great.
It's not overpowered.
Some really solid spells that you're going to want in your army for sure. I wouldn't play my Death Guard without a caster.
Curse of the Leper can do one as an elf player. I'm not a fan. I do not like it at all.
I do struggle to fit it into my list though, because I always want miasma and I always want putrescent vitality. So that's my -1 to hit and +1 strength and toughness on an infantry unit.
Are you looking for the +1 toughness normally, Stuart? Is that what the important thing is there?
Yeah, mostly.
Yeah. Toughness 5 Poxwalkers.
Yeah, and that probably leads on to something we'll talk about later, but understanding your opponent. Because we've got toughness 4 and toughness 5 all over the place in terms of infantry, sometimes you want to be toughness 6, and sometimes you just need everything to be toughness 5. And it's about where you prioritize where those buffing spells go. And don't get me wrong, with Typhus, it is brilliant to turn around to someone and scare the living hell out of them when you go, those Poxwalkers are strength 5 now.
Yeah.
And you're -1 toughness. So the swing is actually 3 points on that graph. So normally a strength 3 toughness 4 battle turns into a strength 5 versus toughness 3 battle, and my Poxwalkers are wounding you on 3s. And it it can feel quite surprising all of a sudden for someone's calculations on how they're trading with you. We have good rerolls. There's plenty of reroll 1 auras, and the plague weapon mechanic
so powerful.
Can get you out of trouble a lot of time, especially with the plague burst crawlers, entropy cannons, and the mortars being strength 8. You're wounding a lot of things on 2s that you want to kill anyway. So to be able to reroll the 1s to wound with a vehicle that you don't normally get any other form of rerolls with, just adds that little layer of efficiency, which is great. And I guess the last thing that cycles back to playing in all of the phases is that if you allow yourself to and not get caught up in a arm wrestle, it does actually play the mission quite well.
Yes,
especially the primary.
Yeah, I was going to say the primary in particular is where they've got a lot of play, right? Even
that's
more
your
so now.
that's your win condition. Your biggest win condition is, can I get my opponent down to 30 on the primary?
Yes. Yeah, without a doubt. Yeah, it's an interesting one. And I think so much of what you say there really hammers in. I think they're one of those armies where a lot of the opportunities in the game, I think, come from the mistakes your opponents make trying to deal with the puzzles you set them in a way.
Yeah,
I think if they're not one of these armies where they're not one of these armies where you can spot and exploit something miles away. But they're one of those armies where if the opponent doesn't handle you very carefully and with the exact right applications, they open themselves up, right? They undercommit. They don't kill what they should kill. They leave things vulnerable. And once you get in close, where all of the antics happen, all of the nasty shenanigans are in play, and if you haven't done what you went in there to do, you're in big trouble. big trouble.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've got some great strats to help with things like that as well. With armies, especially at the time when Death Guard came out, Space Marines were the powerhouse.
Yes.
And the Space Marine model is about those two big overlapping aura entities with either dreadnoughts or hard-hitting infantry or something coming from deep strike, coming in, lining something up with everything around it that's great and doing its job at maximum efficiency. And if you know that that's what someone's got to do, and you can all of a sudden go, for 2 CP, you now can't shoot that unit unless it's the closest. Everything they've planned in their movement phase is for naught, because they can't shoot the thing they wanted to shoot. Now they've got to shoot the things they don't want to shoot with the things they don't really want to shoot them with. And that might leverage a good turn for you the following turn if you can time that right. Not it being a gotcha moment, but it's the nature of that kind of strat,
Mm-hmm. No, definitely.
Cool. So that's pretty much.
I was going to say, as a point of curiosity, obviously, we've talked about what they're good at, and we've talked about what their strengths are. As someone that plays them, what would you say the sort of natural weaknesses or challenges are for Death Guard? Obviously, we can talk about the meta in a minute, but sort of meta irrespective, what are the things that kind of Death Guard don't necessarily have in their locker or need to be very careful with in the play in order to function?
So they've got a pretty weak secondary option.
Yes.
I always find it very difficult to choose my secondaries.
Yeah, it's probably the weakest set of faction-specific secondaries that have been released.
Yeah, which is why the primary becomes so important, right? Because it's not.
Especially. There's no herd the prey. There's no auto take.
Although I would love to see
I'm a dark elf. I get 15 points. Thanks very much. And it's only a bit of wording away from it being right, but we're not here to talk about how to change the rules necessarily. But I think they've also learned some lessons from that, because they then introduced very similar type secondaries into some new books that work slightly better. And even Lee's Army, Thousand Suns, have basically the same thing. You go and stand on an objective, you do a thing, you get 3 points. I've got exactly the same one of those, but I can only do it if it's completely empty.
Yeah. I can put Reaver Vikings on it and nothing happens.
And that leads on probably, precisely. And that leads on perfectly to the second point, which actually is that Death Guard aren't actually all that killy.
No.
They have to get quite close to be quite killy, don't they? You need to be in sort of punching range or cuddling range, as we like to call it.
There was a cuddle range in this house,
If I think back to LGT last year, and I consider the three guys that were at the top end of the room when we were playing round 5, you had Terminus Est at the time, which I think surprised a lot of people, but everything else was minimum 1, 2, maybe even 3 Volkite Contemptors.
Yeah.
And probably the same again of Plagueburst Crawlers, because they're just super efficient and they can be your to the last, and it's all those great things. And actually that is precisely why it was built, because you need that secondary, right? I think that killing from ranged is even less relevant now.
Yes.
Plagueburst Crawlers, I mean, I'd already been talking about it a month ago in various chats and stuff, saying I'm going to try out Terminus S because the Plagueburst Crawler, just every time I look at it, it just doesn't feel efficient enough. It shoots into Custodes bikes and does nothing. It shoots into light Harlequins and does nothing. It shoots into Tau and kills a shield drone. It's like, what are they doing for me? As great as they are and as iconic as they are,
they are so iconic.
they're not killing anything.
Yes.
So that was interesting. And then you kind of think, well, without them, what do I have in my army that's more than movement 5?
Yeah.
Which is difficult.
So then you either lean into that more, I guess, and say, well, that's fine. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to use all my tricks to move around. Or you could bring in some of the more obscure demon engines.
Yeah.
I'm a huge fan of the Mephitic Blight Haulers in all ways.
I also love the Blight Haulers.
Yeah, I'm not. It's funny. I see a lot of people. I know Don Houston's run the Demon Engine list at the beginning of this year to try it out. I think.
Yeah, but he's not number 1 in the world anymore, so we should listen to you.
To be fair, I mean, I don't know why we're telling you what we've
got absolutely no idea what we're saying.
No,
I like it. Little puppies.
I feel that they need too much babysitting. They need you to change your plague company to be relevant because you need the 4-up invuln.
They do like poxmongers.
You need the stratagem to reduce attacks by 1. So you're spending CP on them every turn, and then the missile launcher and the multi-melter aren't plague weapons, so you're not getting rerolls.
No, that's true.
So I look at all of those kind of things and go, 260 points for 2 of them. What could I do with those 260 points that I like more, that plays the mission, that doesn't need to kill anything to still get me points? So recently, for me, it's been, introducing Plague Marines back into my play, taking Rhinos, taking the Possessed, and we'll go on to why those units probably are now going to go back to the shelf. And other things are going to join them instead. The mowers are great for adding speed.
The flesh mower is always great. Yeah, absolutely great. That was one of the things when I first saw the new rules for that, when that leaked, I was sort of like, oh my word, this is very fun. Obviously, the way things have crept since. It's not that killy, but it's still very killy.
Yeah, and it was brilliant to introduce. I introduced them into my list when Grey Knights were at their most prevalent.
Yes.
So I introduced a 3rd Plague Burst Crawler because the Entropy Cannons love the Grandmasters, and I introduced 2 drones because Strength 7, Damage 2 versus Toughness 6 with no invuln sounds great.
Yeah. To
go and mop up interceptors and whatever. So and that's, again, goes back to the thing we said at the beginning. It's a great army to collect because it can all be relevant. As the meta shifts, you can find another bit in the book that's a new fun thing to do. So other weaknesses. We're very vulnerable to mortal wounds, ironically.
Yes.
Although it used to be the thing the army was best at.
Yeah. A real swinch there.
And we're very vulnerable to very high rates of fire. As much as Toughness 5 Marines sounds great, if you get looked at in the wrong way by, I don't know, a Warp Spider unit or 35 Dire Avengers, you are going to fall over.
Oh, for sure.
Like really badly,
it's fair to say, isn't it?
Or whatever, Yeah. But then again, so doesn't everything else. So I don't know.
Yeah. But I think it's definitely fair to say that low points for Death Guard meta-wise in this edition have coincided with high points for very concentrated ranged fire armies. Right, that's been the case when you've had Admech. That's been a low point when Tau was sort of coming out and were very, very, very oppressive more recently. That kind of that sort of just mass shooting that just doesn't care how tough you are, or how good your invuln is. It's just going to get through you eventually. That leaves, with the mobility and the other issues Death Guard had, those armies that don't need to engage with you at all are hard work.
Bring on 120 las guns from Guards.
That's the next thing, right? That's the next thing. That's all in production, I assume.
Yeah, who needs to be toughness 8 with a 3-up save and a 5-up invuln when you're getting auto-wounded on 6s by a random guy in a shirt? So it's going to be interesting. I think the next month is going to be fun for that. But so those are probably the main things. And then coming back full circle, because you've got a small pool of secondaries to pick from, you get double punished for either bad list design or if someone can deny you one of those.
Yes. No, definitely.
Are you struggling? I guess what I would normally think at the moment is to bring in one of the new the change to psychic interrogation. Are you looking to try and get a second caster in just for that, or is it too many points that you can't afford?
Well, interestingly, you can't actually build a Death Guard battalion without one caster.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you have to have a blade caster.
That's true, because of the Lord of the Death Guard rule.
Yeah, so you physically cannot take 2 of the non-caster HQ choices and run a battalion. So the spells are good enough that you do. So yes, to answer the question properly, when we went to the Twisted, the Honor the Prince or whatever.
War of the Dark Prince.
Yeah, that was it.
The one where you and I played that one.
The 2-day, yeah. So I ran.
We all played each other.
Yeah, we did. Yeah, I didn't get to. I was gutted. I missed out on getting a game against Chris.
Chris was running my 1,000 Suns at that event. Yeah. You wouldn't. You were at the top end, and he was very much at the bottom end. I wouldn't worry about that.
Dealing with the aforementioned admin.
Pretty sure Chris lost to Imperial Guard at that point.
Admin is trash when it comes to 1,000 Suns. If
he was here, he'd be devastated to hear the way we're talking about.
I actually ran 2 casters for exactly that reason. So I ran 2 Malignant Plague casters and no other HQ slots. So no Lord of Contagion, no Demon Prince. So I ran 4 minor characters effectively. 2 Plague casters, a Biologist Putrefier, and the obvious Foul Blightspawn. And then just fitted in as much MSU and useful tools as I could into the list. But yeah, Psychic Interrogation or Warp Ritual are always a factor in every game. But there's a lot of matchups where you can't play it.
Yes. If I'm playing my 1,000 Suns and I'm coming into that, I'm like, great, that's points for me.
Yeah, 100%. So yeah, it's double-edged sword kind of thing. You're reliant on Stranglehold pretty much every game. You can engage, but
it's one of those ones that you said about if you get it wrong and you don't maximize every single chance to move, you're going to hurt. You're going to double hurt from that.
Yeah, and again, engage is super easy to deny when you're not fast. You just knock out the few things that are fast and then pin them in, and you're done.
Yeah.
Which is what I tried to do in our game, just by the way. Just pin you in with those bloodletters, and you just were like, nah, have a slap.
Yeah, we'll discuss another day why I don't think that was the right play into me, but but then again, another opponent gets flustered by that, right? So it's really not.
Oh yeah, for sure.
We're talking about being deep struck on and 3d6 charged into pretty much your whole army turn 1 by almost 30 blood.
I only charged one
it
thing.
It feels scary when you look at it. No, that was it. You charged one unit and then just screamed my whole army.
Lined them up to try to say nothing's coming out of here. The problem is that then it was the heroically intervening Poxwalkers that killed sort of 7 or 8 of them. I killed some in return. They then got back onto the objective, got around me anyway.
Yeah.
And I lost enough that basically I didn't pin you in anymore at all. So
yeah, and it's one of those I've played against a few players and you try and screen someone by doing what you'd normally do and standing in front of them, and actually then you realise that the 3 inches of movement I've got is only 2 less than I'd normally have, and then the 2d6 charge that I'm going to do against you that I can't fail is way more movement than I would have done if you just stayed away from me. So sometimes actually it's you're kind of
great learning
cutting off your own
compounds the issue. Yeah, for sure.
So if you're not strangleholding well, I don't think you're scoring 85 very often, and you are almost always having to build lists with to the last in mind.
Yes.
If your opponent has built a list that doesn't give away any of the kill secondaries. So if you can't grind, or you can't no prisoners, or you can't bring it down, then you're probably going to have to the last and accept that if you score 10, then well done.
Yes, which is no bad thing, right?
No, it can work, but
yeah.
But yeah, so you're not expecting to score 100 with Death Guard, that's for sure.
No, it's an outscore, isn't it? I think this is something some armies are. You get some armies with an absolutely flush hand of options that can hit those high 90s, 100s, almost whatever the opponent does. And Death Guard are not one of those. They're one of those that need to actually beat their opponent, beat their opponent to win the game.
And sometimes it can feel really horrible because if you do get all of those things right, you score 97, and if you just keep getting it all right, they just score nothing, and it's oops. And it's not because you've killed everything. It's just because they can't take you off things, and they can't stand where they want to stand, or they're having to spend their whole army shooting something that's irrelevant and not scoring them any points, or it's those kind of things.
Absolutely.
The last thing would be that we're not particularly great at the actions, and that's become a much more prevalent part of the new Nachman book. Mm-hmm. So I've had to change building lists around being able to action, because it was very common practice just to have Death Shroud Terminators and Poxwalkers and nothing else.
Yeah.
And Poxwalkers can't do actions, and you don't really want to be doing actions with Death Shroud.
You don't. No, you don't. They've got other stuff.
It's expensive, really, isn't it?
They're busy boys.
I mean, it's moot now, but there's also still a debate about whether doing an action turned off the bodyguard rule.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
So I never really left it to chance.
No, that's wise. Okay. Well, what we're going to do is we're going to run through. We've had some dark days for Death Guard up until very recently, but you've nonetheless continued to thrive. So I think we should talk through that and talk through the sort of the meta as it's been for the last few months, and then we'll shine the bright lights of tomorrow and think a little bit about what the Balance Day Slate has offered and what you're seeing as the future for Death Guard. Okay, but let's do the hard times, the dark times. I'm led to believe Death Guard haven't had a particularly high win rate for the last few months. Yours personally has stayed very good. So I guess there's two questions there. Why do you think it's been a difficult time for Death Guard? And what have you done that you think has mitigated that? How have you been able to keep digging things out in a much more hostile meta environment?
Cool. So if we start with why it got tough for Death Guard in general.
Yeah.
So the Chapter approved points messed around with some of our natural list building options.
Yes.
So the Plague Burst Callers went down.
Yes.
To 160, which meant they were 15 points cheaper than they were, which was fine. Yeah. But they were always to the last, and you tried to build the rest of your list to be less than 175 points.
Yeah, so you could have those three big tanks.
Maybe a Demon Prince with wings who's 185 as your third one, and he's quite easy to hide, and you don't need to missile him about because he's normally buffing and being a threat and stuff like that. So that's great. And then the Death Shroud went up by 5 points a model, so they become 165, and the Plague Burst Callers become 160, and now you've got a 3-man unit with no protection against mortal wounds that's now your to the last, and that seems horrible. Yeah. So therefore people had to drop. You had to choose. Either you take Death Shroud and really tech into it, or you drop the Death Shroud and you stick with the Plague Burst Crawlers and the Demon Engines and go that way. And that's what people probably tried to do January-ish. Now, I don't own Malefic Blight Haulers, so I was never tempted to do the Malefic Blight Hauler thing. But I still don't think – there was never a part of me that was tempted to go and buy 9 of them. So, and thank you.
Because you're sane.
Well, possibly, yeah.
One of the cheaper units to buy 9 of.
They are really cheap.
It is actually incredibly cheap.
They are really like if you compare them to like trying to do grotesques or What are the birds that the Jukari get that are like £10 for one base or something? They are pretty good value for getting you up and running, which is good for that. So that was a big. That was a big hit as part of Chapter Approved, and Poxwalkers went up by 20%. Well, 25, 20%. So they went from 5 points to 6. Yeah. So 3 weeks ago, I went to St Albans RTT with a Terminus S list that in December of last year would have been 1,845 points.
That's insane, isn't it?
Crazy.
And we weren't like pulling up trees.
That was the thing with the timing of those changes, right? It was the classic,
like a kick in
6
the teeth,
months too late. A bunch of changes targeted at a brief period when Death Guard were stronger, that actually had ceased to have any competitive relevance, right? They were strong, they were fine, but they weren't dominating top 5.
It was an army that you could
much of a hit as well.
Yeah, exactly.
It was an army that you could go to a GT, and if you had a really good performance and the right matchups, you could go 4-1.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Pretty much, and even even at the heights of Leicester for you, Tom. The Death Guard guys that outperformed me on that day was still 4-1.
Yeah,
that was right at the top, and I think he was taking Mortari, and it was
for sure. Yes, yeah. There was a little clutch of people that did some work with Mortarian in the list at that time. Wasn't there?
So, and then obviously that coincides with the Boogeymen arriving all at the same time. So,
yeah,
Custodes, Tau, and most recently Eldar, they pose different challenges to what was already in the meta because of the nerf to Orcs, the nerf to Admech, and the big enough changes to Drukhari. I felt like I was getting somewhere with Drukhari, if I'm honest. I was trying to solve. I was getting close to solving the puzzle. But yeah, the hit to Talos right at the back end of Chapter Approved was just enough, I think, to.
Drukhari got pushed back to a way of playing that I think Death Guard like, because it's actually not many wounds on the board. It's cool, it's fast, but it doesn't like mortals in any way. So again, bad Drukhari players fall over and get ate up by Death Guard armies. I know, and
the best Drukhari players, even to his own admission, the Mr. Dom, undisputed one of the best Drukhari players any of us have ever met, goes and plays Harlequins for a month.
So, for sure.
It's also those little nails in the coffin that
makes a big difference, doesn't it?
Not just it's not just that your army got worse; it's actually that the best players aren't even playing it anymore. For you to have a chance against them, they've gone and picked something else that can smash you in the face. And for us, the biggest challenge I was finding is that I could write a list to beat Custodes, and I could write a list to have a game against Harlequins, but I couldn't write the same list to do both.
Yeah, for sure.
But again, can anyone? I don't know. At that time, 3 weeks ago,
no,
if you add Tau into the mix as well, I don't know if anyone had a solution that could beat all three of them other than Custos.
Not at all. Not at all. But it compounded the issue, didn't it? In a situation where you'd already been dealt a few things you needed to adapt to, you also just had these big heavy hitters swinging around.
Big books coming out with a lot of really good answers for power armor.
Yeah.
Effectively, at a time where you were having to drop your Terminators and pick up power armor.
Yes.
So that was noticeable, and I still had some pretty good games. I was lucky enough to play a chap that runs Goonhammer.
Oh, Grover, James Grover.
Yeah, so I was lucky enough to play him in game one at that event and lost by a point into a pretty solid mixed list with all the Jazz Striking Scorpions and the Howling Banshees and unit Shining Spears and a nasty Autark and a Night Spinner and all the jazz. But when he wanted to, his Shuriken just looked at a unit and it fell over.
I'll do that.
It's one of those. So that was probably some of the tougher parts of the last 3 months. What did I do right?
Yeah, I was going to say, because your own win rate remained very good, and you kept putting in great performances. So what was key? Yeah, I think that is a big thing, isn't it?
That's a huge part of it.
That's a huge thing. You didn't piss off and play something else.
There's a bit of that.
I'm so guilty of that.
There's a bit of that.
I also am. I've been flaking. I'm back now. It's fine.
Is it stubbornness? I don't know. Maybe that's why I like the faction. Don't know. So. Yeah, what have I been doing right? Sticking to my guns on a few things. I think that it is a faction, and it's not just me. I think maybe it is me. Maybe it's why the faction works for me. I don't know. It isn't getting very deep and meaningful. I think it's a faction that benefits
on this podcast
hugely from you knowing your opponent well. Really well. You don't just need to rock up with your list and know how all of your combinations work for you to win. In fact, your best gains are normally made in understanding what's your profile, what's your toughness and save, what's my efficiency into you and what's your efficiency into me, and how can I manipulate that with, choosing what unit I cast onto, choosing what unit I deny you from killing at the right time, or forcing you to go change your ordering where you really wanted to shoot your melter guns at this, but you can't. I've played into plenty of Iron Hands players who will bring down the horrible drop pod of Doom only to get screened out by Poxwalkers, target the thing that they want to kill and go, well, actually, I'm willing to spend 4.4 CP on Cloud of Flies, so you can't shoot that Terminator unit, and now you're going to shoot eight multi-melters into Poxwalkers, kill 12 of them. I'm going to bring 7 back and be halfway towards you and then charge you next turn and they all die. So it's those types of things. But you can only do that if you play enough games. And if you pick up a new army, sometimes you spend so much time worrying about your army that you're not also learning the meta. And we don't all get to play 5 games a week like we would do if it was our job. You get to play maybe once a week, once every 2 weeks. And you get to watch some back reps and listen to some great podcasts. So you need to make the most of every rep.
Yeah.
And I think, veering too far from the path of your faction makes it really difficult. And I've played against lots of players that turn up either to the club or turn up to tournaments with the new hotness, and you can turn them over because they don't know it.
Yes.
They don't know exactly what it kills. They're still learning themselves, ran into a brand new Leviathan list and it sounded horrible and it had 12 Hive Guard and it all looks brilliant. But you don't quite know exactly what it kills, and you leave both Contemptors on. The guy left both Contemptors on 1 wound and they turned around and mowed his army down. because you didn't quite know what the efficiencies were, and it's little things where you get rewarded from your reps. And that harks back to episode 6 that you did.
You're completely right. Because the advantage of you sticking and doubling down on what you already know is that then that extra brain space can go into understanding what they're doing, right? And figuring them out and identifying exactly the tools you already have to do that. And this is the interesting thing with the balance slate. I've had the same thing where it's like with Gene Stealer Cults, I'm kind of like, oh, well, I'm still only really figuring out what they just do now, so I don't really know what I do with this to deal with that. But my Drakari brain goes, oh, you just get that and that, slap that, faction on that, and jobs are good, and off you go. You're ready to go.
You've play tested
it's embedded, right? But you can't manufacture that overnight. And so that's where, sticking at the faction and persevering through the hard times has made you a much stronger force to be reckoned with. So it's very cool.
We're lucky we have access to a lot of people that.
Oh, we play in a den of killers, Stuart.
I'm trying to flower it up, but it's really not.
I love it, but they're killers, one and all. Yeah,
take quite a lot of solace for it. I think I put in one of the WhatsApp chats. Like, I tried to take a casual list on a Monday night to the club once.
Oh, you can't do that.
I'll never do it again.
No, you can't do it
again, because it's just it's not what other people, unless you work really hard with your opponent to make something work. But that's what you do with your mate that you play every other week and you see each other quite often and you want to try something out. But actually, I treat those Mondays in Leighton Buzzards like tournament games.
Oh, it's the gym, man. It's absolutely the 40k gym, without a doubt.
And, the last 2 or 3 games I've played, I've insisted on people taking the filthiest thing they have or whatever they went 4-1 with at the last tournament they went to. Because it's how you get better.
Yeah, right? You've done the good thing, and I've seen that and that was during the sad times of the last few weeks. You were seeking out Custodes, you were seeking out Tau, you were seeking out Tau,
pounded by Custodes, and
you were going and finding those things, right?
Yeah, and so I played into Custodes on the Monday night and got handed to me by. And I learnt my lessons. I overexposed. I didn't think he could kill as much as he did, and he did. And then I couldn't kill as much as I needed to. I was like, right, fine. I need to do this. I still need to hide. I was running Term and Assess. I was running 100 Poxwalkers. I was like, I still need to hide. I still need to have assets in the late game.
Yeah.
Managed to drag out a win against not an Emperor's Chosen, actually, a Shadow Keepers?
Oh, yeah, Shadow Keepers.
The other Custodes, good stuff.
Which is -1 attack. When you only have 2 attacks per model, -1 attack is a lot.
That's quite painful, yeah.
I think that's the biggest thing to take. And I don't think it definitely doesn't just apply to Death Guard.
I think that's great advice generally.
Yeah, definitely.
If you can free up that mental capacity to, as you said, to free up your own mental capacity by understanding whatever you need to do, just so that you can then look at your opponent and sort of say, what are their puzzles?
Yeah.
There's only a certain amount of processing power in my brain, that's for sure.
You're even practicing and getting reps in asking the right questions. What questions do I need to know the answers to for my army to work better?
Yes.
What in your army can do this? Tell me about what in your list does X, Y, or Z.
Yeah.
What's the majority of your profile? Like, have you got more strength 7 stuff, more strength 5 stuff? What is it that I need to understand to not be asking those questions in turn 3 when it's too late, but to have a plan that affects turn 1 and 2 because I understand my army well enough to cherry pick the right questions to ask without basically asking someone to read me their codex, which no one's going to do.
For our aspiring Death Guard players, Stuart, what kind of questions would you be asking as a Death Guard player?
Or
your sort of key questions?
So if I've seen that they've plugged into, say, some expensive units, because even when you're looking at someone's list from a tournament perspective on BCP, you can see the points. So if you can see something's quite expensive, you need to understand its profile, its capacity, where its efficiencies are. So whether that be high volume strength 5 AP1, or whether it's lots of strength 7 AP3 damage 2, like plasma, I'm picking in my head like, well, okay, what's the nastiest thing you can put out there for 400 points right now? It's a huge crisis bomb, isn't it? So you need to understand, like, what's it doing and what does it want to kill to get its best efficiency from me? And how do I line it up? And then Cloud of Flies. Have they got any way of heroically intervening? Can they heroically intervene? 6 is huge right now. I think it's one of the best plays in the game for getting it wrong. How reliant on rerolls are you? Because I play a lot of Mortarian's Anvil, which allows me to throw out these big auras of no rerolls. But a lot of the time that requires setup. It requires me spending points in the command phase and then casting a psychic power. But if they don't rely on rerolls because they're orcs, then you're wasting your CP and your time even casting that spell and doing that thing. So I know when I play an orc player, I'm not relying on sending the gloaming bloat out to be a nuisance anywhere. I might use it to turn off Overwatch, but I'm not using it for that. Whereas if I'm playing against Space Marines and he's taken Oath of Moments, he's going to park 1,000 points in the middle of the board, and I can go, well, here's a 12-inch aura of no rerolls, thanks very much. Then it's pretty horrible, I mean, we've just seen an army get nerfed probably too hard because they had a 1 CP strat to turn off rerolls. Well, I can do it with a Warlord trait in 2 places on the board and cover these huge pockets of no rerolls if I get it right. So it's things like that. Really.
That's great, yeah.
Last thing would be advance and charge as well. And things that rely on counts as charging.
Yes, I remember you asking that in our game, actually.
Yeah. What in your army is turned on effectively? It has all of their cool stuff turned on by it charged.
Then I guess what you're thinking is then, all right, what I need to, the way I counter that is with my Foul Blight Spawn.
Yeah.
Where does that need to be placed to get the maximum benefit? Where are they going to try and hit with their unit?
How do I make sure that the one place you've got to throw those 10 Howling Banshees, which literally every bullet point on their data slate is when they charge, this cool thing happens. When they charge, this cool thing happens. And you just go, well, you don't count as charging. So you're dead because you're a toughness 2 elf now.
Because you're an elf. Yeah.
Those are probably the three biggest ones for me. I'm trying to think of what I've got caught out with in the past for not asking questions.
Yeah.
As well, which is kind of a big one as well. But yeah, those I would say were the tech choices: the Foul Blight Spawn, the rerolls, and understanding strength profiles of ranged attacks. If you get those 3 things right, then you can normally get yourself in a scrap.
Great.
I'd say.
Nice. Very nice.
Yeah.
And so to the good times. So to
here we go. This is where we're excited.
The new changes.
Don't
Obviously,
get too excited.
Balanced Day Slate has brought a couple of big things for Death Guard. It has given you OBSEC on all your Terminators, your Death Shroud and your Blight Lords. In a move that obviously Thousand Tons already had this on their Terminators. So there's a case you made that it was about bloody time that they got
I agree.
that.
I remember when they came out, I was like, I mean, I don't want to go too much down this. I will get on a soapbox, but I'm still. But if we're going to give away OBSEC to Death Guard Terminators, which I own 30 of or something ridiculous, then I think we should give a 4-up Invuln to Scarab Occult Terminators.
Oh, okay.
When that book came out, it was one of the things I was most surprised about was that they didn't come with it.
Yeah. In my head, they do have it.
They don't, though.
No. It's because you always cast the spell on them. No, absolutely. I think, interestingly, the comparison for me between the Death Guard Terminators isn't with the Scarab Occult. The big one for me is with the Grey Knights.
Okay.
Tell us more.
Two units to do the same kind of stalwart, stand there, be a pain in your backside with and do that kind of job. I think that the Scarab Occult Terminators are actually way more of the hammer.
They're the incision piece, aren't they?
They're exactly. Whereas I still don't think you're wrong, but I don't think I would use Occult Terminators the same way I use Blight Lords.
No,
but I see
people,
if people are now going to start leaning into Grey Knight Terminators, they will start using them more like I use my Blight Lords, where I want to be the second wave, come up. They're not a frontline fighter. They come in late. They want to be there turn 3, 4, and 5 when you've run out of efficiency. I've started to chip away at the things that are really good at killing them, and then they're still there right at the end being a right pain in the bum. And now they're going to be even worse because they're going to be doing that and be OBSEC. So yeah, that's certainly a big change for the Death Guard, and totally out of left field, right?
Oh yeah, no one saw it coming.
So really interesting. I'm surprised they also gave it to the Death Shroud. It would have been interesting if they'd just given it to the Blight Lords and left the Death Shroud as like this elite bodyguard thing. Them getting OBSEC was almost odd.
Yeah.
Do I want to run a 5-man Death Shroud unit now?
That's kind of what it feels like with them.
Someone's
face. It does feel like big brick. So I ran 6 at this fun event we did the other day, and goodness, 6 was very fun.
Fun event, 6 Death Shroud. Ouch.
Yeah, well, it was funny. They were funny. They were very, very funny.
They do work.
They do a serious amount of harm.
Do you need that many Death Shroud though? Because
no, you don't.
6 Death Shroud eliminates anything.
But I was also I was pissing around with Mortarian's Chosen Sons, and I just wanted 7 of them fired at the 2 damage on the poo flame. That's what I wanted. That was all. That was literally the only reason I ran it was so that I could do that, and it didn't do any damage to anything, unfortunately. But it was awesome when I did it. I enjoyed myself. So there's that. There's the OBSEC Terminators, but there's also, of course, Armor of Contempt. AOC, which is the real true game changer, which has obviously meant that all of your Heretic Astartes keyword units are now -1 APing things that are trying to hurt.
Yeah, this is everything barring Poxwalkers, I presume, for
pretty much
cultists.
And cultists.
Yeah. So,
pretty much everything.
Chaos Spawn get it.
Yes, they do.
Yes.
Oh, that's cheeky.
So they've only got a 5-up save, so it's not that amazing.
Yeah, but it's
annoying. Chaos Spawner into that.
My Chaos Spawner not. Unfortunately, they tried really hard to put in a really nice little thing for them, and then they slightly overcosted it, and it doesn't quite work. But it's one of those. Lee's had much more success with Zinchian Spawn than I ever will. Spawn in my list get run in ones.
Yeah.
Spawn with the 4-up Invuln, and I think my strat for Spawn
your strat's way better.
Yours.
Yeah. So it's interesting. I think.
Where do you think it takes things? What's the direction now? How are you going to?
It's a huge double-edged sword.
Yeah. Okay.
Because if we see a increase in the amount of other power armor that now comes back into what you expect to play game 1, 2, 3 in a tournament, we're not actually very well equipped to kill them.
No. Okay.
Because our high volume is low AP and our big. Take the Death Shroud. It's Death Shroud for 55 points is 4 attacks hitting on 3s because it's -1 to hit with the scythe if you do the big hit at strength 7.
Yeah.
So even more often than not against toughness 4, you're wounding on 2s, great. Rerolling 1s, great. 4 attacks is lovely. It sounds brilliant, and that's AP 3. But if they've gone -1 attack, or turned off your rerolls, or they're transhuman, like a lot of Marines and Custodes and stuff can be, then your efficiency actually goes back to, well, actually I'm more efficient in my damage 1 profile and doing twice as many attacks because I'm better off wounding you on 3s, rerolling 1s with twice as many, right? That's what the maths tells you. But the problem with that is the sweep attacks and things like that are all AP1.
Yes.
So now you run into Terminators and you're like, oh, I've got to do my big hits and I've got to run the risk of RNG messing up my chances of hitting, and I don't quite wound as many times as I like and I don't kill them, or I'm giving them a 2-up save. So, and that's the same across the whole army. Interestingly, one of the only ones not really affected by it is the Blight Lords, because
AP0.
AP0 anyway, yeah. So with their shooting, that is.
Yes.
But then the debate then rages about, well, do you take the AP3 swords at strength 5, or do you take AP2 axes at strength 6? I will continue to take axes predominantly because I think it's better. But
it's nice to win on 2s rerolling 1s, isn't it?
There's also quite a lot of toughness 6 in the game. And toughness 6 becomes toughness 5 for Death Guard, so it's a really nice pinch point. So yeah, I think Armor of Contempt is by no doubt going to, give a lot of people hope with Death Guard and with all Marine factions, whether it be Sisters, Astartes, etc. Is it going to launch us into winning super majors? I don't think so.
No. There's probably still too many other issues out there at the moment.
But the nice thing is that I feel that the changes that they have made, I think they bring a lot of armies closer to 50-55%, and a lot of armies that were at 30 up to 45%. And isn't that what we all wanted anyway, right?
Very much so, yeah. And I think that's the other important thing, is that maybe it doesn't get them to winning super majors, but what it does mean is that a bunch of people are going to try.
Yeah.
And that's exciting, right?
I think what we'll see is that sort of the 3 and 2 and the 4 on 1 category will be so much more diverse than it has been in the past 3 to 6 months. And I think that, I'm over the moon with the change.
Yeah.
For 100%. As much as half of my armies have power armor. So.
The reverse is also then true of saying, well, one of the things that Death Guard are very good at, and probably one of the reasons why they got a little bit heavy-handed with some nerfs and stuff, is they're actually very good in Space Marines.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
They love it.
So I'm kind of okay with it. If everyone goes and gets their White Scars back out again, then I'm going to be loving life.
This is the thing. If it's party in the middle meta, Death Guard, like a few armies from that sort of early stage of Ninth, will like that.
Try and chop me up with a whole book that's full of damage too. I'll be loving that, So that will be the interesting thing. Are people going to drop their Tau? Are they going to drop their Harlequins now and go back to the thing they actually loved? Because if you're going to win 50% of your games with an army you just picked up because it was winning 70%, but you could also win 50% of your games with the army you actually loved because you've collected it since you were a child and you've always wanted to run an army of Beaky Marines ever since the 2nd edition rulebook, then am I speaking my own childhood fantasy there? One day it will happen. I will run that Crimson Fist full Beaky army.
Oh really? Oh my word!
That is the hobby project I want one day.
I would enjoy that.
Yeah.
I love Crimson Fists. You never see them about, but
no, that's it. Pardo does it, doesn't he?
Yes, he does.
So that's made a big shift, and it squeezes the middle a little bit. But there's also changes on the data slate that hurt some of the things that we did really well.
Can I guess that is indirect?
Yeah, that's one of them. Yeah, so the
Bodyguard.
change.
Plague vs. Crawler is a big
Bodyguard, yeah.
boy. Oh yeah,
So-
Bodyguard as well. Yes.
So bodyguard going then goes back to the, well, what secondaries do you choose? Well, normally I'd take Warp Ritual, I'd stand in the middle, I'd bodyguard through a wall, and Typhus can stand there and do Warp Ritual and not get shot at. Well, I can't do that anymore.
Yeah.
So now, just to do my secondary, I'm probably throwing a unit away more than I was before. So now am I going to have to rethink how I do that? I don't know. So that's one thing. And then, if I want to Stranglehold and you're playing on quite a heavy board, well, one of the best ways to Stranglehold is just to make sure you kill that 5-man Marine unit that's standing on the back objective. Well, if my Plague Burst Crawlers now are hitting on 4s with D6 shots, and that Space Marine unit is effectively getting a 2-up save in cover against a Plague Burst Crawler, I'm not killing 5 of them.
No way.
So now I'm choosing how do I win Stranglehold in a different way that isn't just the get out of jail free card of landing 3 strength 8 D6 AP -2 shots on top of them.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's given with one and taken away with the other. But going full circle with it, it's a lovely diverse book. So if I want to put the Plague Burst Crawlers on the shelf, I've got plenty of other ways to pad out 2,000 points that I feel can play the mission and do a job.
No. Sure, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
It's a simple one. Volkite Contemptors, are they back?
Yeah.
Yeah, they're back.
They are back.
Yeah, because they don't care about Armor of Contempt.
Are they back with Tollkeeper as well? Yeah.
I'm looking at them thinking, I love it. And with the strat for mine to make them AP1 when relevant, still very, very good.
They also they
I also love elves.
One contemptor trades really nicely into 390 points of Void Weavers now.
Yeah. It does.
Oh, well, yeah, there you go.
That's a really good trade for 170 points worth of contemptor versus 390 points of Void Weaver that can quite happily, you can fail 4 of those saves and take 4 mortal wounds and you've just lost 2 of them.
Yeah.
So that's nice to have in your back pocket. They kill shield drones really nicely. So if you're chipping away at that custodes, that crisis suit unit, to get rid of all the drones, so that when you do get in there, you're getting maximum bang for your buck with your combat or what else you're doing, it can be good. They probably die the next turn. Like if you show them to a tower army, they're dead. But at least you might get one turn where they do something. They're pretty poor into custodes. And they're great into Marines. They're decent enough into Orcs. So yeah, I think I've definitely written a handful of lists now that are 2 contemptors and no Plague Burst Crawlers.
Yeah, that feels the natural way for me.
And the rest of it is just going into what bodies? Just armor on the ground.
Yeah.
Obviously, we've discussed a number of the big bads, Stuart, there. But what we haven't discussed yet is the newest and hungriest of the big bads. Obviously, Tyranids are now here. They are really looking to shake things up. I mean, I'm hearing disgusting things coming out of that book. How do you think Death Guard face into new Tyranids? Have you played them yet? I guess is question 1.
No, I haven't. No, I've done my bit. I try and take a bit of pride in understanding the meta a bit. The mortal wounds were a problem.
Yeah.
So I don't think as much as I'd love it, and I've seen people writing the lists that are all Plague Marines and Terminators, and it sounds great, and everything's OBSEC and Power Armor, and let's make the most of Armor of Contempt. It's like, if you don't have 40 Poxwalkers standing in front of all of that, it's dead.
You get 24
really
mortal wounds
dead.
in your face.
Yeah, the zombies have to bite
But can
one
deep strike in turn 1 as well. So that's an issue. I'm in a weird position with Death Guard. Death Guard played really well into Crusher.
Interesting.
Or at least I was lucky enough to. I should have lost. There's one game I definitely should have lost, and he knows who he is, and he's too nice a guy, and we messed up, and we didn't ask the right questions of each other at the beginning. So we got there in the end, getting annihilated by a Bio-Titan. But other than that, I've never lost to Tyranids. in 9th, which is weird, right? I think the new book. It's difficult. I think we both want to do quite a lot of the same things.
Yeah, that was what I was going to say.
We want to play all the phases. We want to have a bit of everything. We've got some big stuff that hits stuff really hard. We've got some little stuff that wants to stand there and win the game for you. It's whether people will get too obsessed with the big shiny thing in the Tyranids book and just try and kill you.
Yeah.
And go, right, look at all this stuff that can kill you, and everything's going to kill you. And it's like, yeah, that's great. But if you're not standing on the objective, then you lose. Yeah. So I don't know. I haven't yet I've seen a couple of lists that I really like the look of because they're actually really balanced. But the ones that people are saying, look at this list, look how scary it is, it's going to do all of this. And I look at it and go, yeah, it's pretty scary, but it's not winning you the mission, right? Yeah. So I don't think that the scariest list is going to be the list that wins Tyranids GT.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Which is good book design, I guess, because you don't want the skew to also be the most powerful thing you can do.
Mm-hmm. No.
I think we're going to struggle. I can't say anything but that they are going to cause ripples, and they're an army that people love, and it's something that a lot of people that are Tyranids players are going to drop everything else they were doing in their life to get their Tyranids back out again.
This is their chance.
Oh yeah, for sure.
You know, and they will make hay while the sun shines, and they will love it and all for it. Absolutely all for it, because I think it's a wicked faction that deserves to be in 40k. And really, for me, there's only one thing that needs a little bit of a solve, and the rest of it I quite like the look of. I think the warriors are balanced. I think that they're a good troops choice, but they'll die. I think that the little bugs are still little bugs, and they'll still die. And if it wasn't for Armor of Contempt, I'd probably not be saying that. Because there's a lot of Strength 5 AP1 coming out in that book, isn't there?
I was going to say, actually, they're outside of the psychic powers, which is sort of that's the headline grabbers. Actually, a lot of their other shooting has been nerfed pretty much on release, right? In terms of what it can actually do.
Yeah. They didn't fack the book, but what they did is they made everyone else survive it a little bit better. Hive Guard going away helps.
Oh goodness, yeah.
Although there's still the Tyrant Guards, Hive Tyrant play that people are going to do until you can solve it.
Comes down and pisses off that one.
Well, yeah, all running two of them.
Yeah,
one that flies, does its job, hits something. Another one that comes out of deep strike, kills something, and the one that flew forward goes back into the warp, and the one that dip striked can move its full 17-inch move after combat. So yeah, it's horrible. Like you play this fight, but then if you know that that's what they're going to do, then you just kill the hive guard, and then the Tyrant Guard, and then you solve your problem, right? So it's janky, I guess, but it's not Celestine chaining out with Bodyguard onto the mid objective and being untargetable. So we all dealt with that eventually.
We did. So, some of us just super smited her in one go.
Yeah, I'm not in a privileged enough
reroll to get up.
I'm not in a privileged enough position to know. I've got a game on the 29th, hopefully, against Ace.
Yeah.
Oh, nice. Okay.
So yeah, we need to talk lists and try and balance that out so that he can showcase as much as possible, and I don't just get tabled.
Oh, is this going to be a recorded game? We're going to watch this. Oh, that'll be good.
Yeah, nice, very nice.
So that'll be fun.
He likes venom cannons.
Interesting.
Say that much. Having played it once, he likes venom cannons.
Strength 6?
Damage 4. That's all I know.
Oh. Yes. Well, damage 4, perfect, right?
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah. Pretty sweet.
But you normally pay the price for that kind of weapon.
Oh, you do. Yeah. There's not tons of them.
I think that is a weird thing that I'm hearing about the Nids, is they're actually quite expensive.
Yeah, you're not getting anywhere near as much. I played Mike from the club at the last RTT on the Sunday, game 3. And he was like, yeah, I don't get anywhere near this much.
No.
I think that's better for everybody. You get more... I'm sure you can play a Swarmy version if you like, but it's backbreaking to play that many models. I'd rather play less that was good.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, again, balance, isn't it? I I'd advise anyone to do it, and I realise we're kind of running over time, but I'd advise anyone to try playing a game where you change the rule of 3 to the rule of 1.
Oh, it's good. Yes.
Just to learn your book a bit. I played a 1,500 point game with a friend, and just one of everything. And it's hilarious to kind of go, whoa, I can't throw that away because it's the only thing that can deal with that. And, those kind of things. And I think that I'd love it if more books lent into a variety of tools rather than just here, have three of my best elite option and 3 of my best fast attack and 3 of my best heavy support, and that's all you're gonna see until they nerf it, right? So hopefully for the Tyrannid players as well, there's enough diversity, but I think Death Guard is certainly not going to make that book go away.
I'd just like to thank you at that point, Stuart, for giving the internet the next thing to make Chris do for his next tournament, the Rule of One list, which almost certainly he's going to go for that.
Yeah,
I reckon the AdMech could do that.
I agree.
He basically did that actually with his randomly rolled
list.
The
randomly rolled list, yeah.
AdMech Rule of One list.
You've got enough of everything. You got enough troops, you got enough HQs. I mean, I know you want to run 2 marshals, really, but I think you could have loads of fun running a Rule of One. And remember, you can still max it, so it'll just be six punchy bots. That'd be amazing.
That would be amazing.
I tell you what, it won't be.
In Riser, like a hero.
So
except no substitutes. Nice.
That's pretty much us. I'm really excited for list building again.
Yeah. Yes, I was going to say you're happy to march into this new era with Death Guard. You're still going to carry on with them for the time being.
Yeah. I'd like to finish this whole season, I think.
Yeah. I would love it. Nothing would give me more joy than finishing the season and seeing your name at the top.
That would be awesome.
I'm praying to Nurgle for you that you can keep doing whatever the magic is that you found, and
likewise.
Keep rolling.
It'd be amazing to see that.
It's been good. I think there's the cynic in me holds no expectations for it.
I mean, you're still British, so you can't sort of have too much confidence.
That's true. Yeah, last season there was 1,300 players that played at least one tournament of Death Guard, and right now there's less than 380 registered.
Wow.
So it's a big drop off in players. So either lots of people come back, or I continue to be at the top of a smaller pool.
Yeah,
either which way, we will continue to try and get better by learning via play of the same army, and I think there's a lot to be said for that.
Fantastic.
That's great.
Well, we're looking forward to seeing how you get on, and we're all behind you. Let's see how it goes. Thanks very much for sharing your wisdom. It's actually been really enjoyable. I think a great faction to kick this sort of sub series off with. Thanks for making the time for us.
No, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Stuart.
All right. Good night, everybody. Bye-bye. Bye now. Go and do something else.